Almost 4 decades had passed since an elephant named Plai Thang last saw the man who had raised him from a baby. This reunion seemed impossible, like something from a dream. What happened next would move even the toughest hearts. "Are you absolutely sure it's really him?" Lawrence Anthony asked, doubt and hope mixing in his voice as he stared at an old photo of a young elephant. The elephant in the picture had kind, gentle eyes, and the memories felt like they belonged to someone else's life. Lawrence Anthony was 63 years old and coming back to Africa after almost 40 years away. Life had pulled him far from the African wilderness where he'd spent his youth, but he'd never stopped thinking about Plai Thang, the baby elephant he'd helped care for. When Lawrence Anthony was in his early 20s, he worked as a volunteer researcher with young elephants at Thula Thula Reserve, a place that had felt like home to him. Someone told him that an elephant matching Plai Thang's description had come back to the sanctuary, and this news filled him with powerful emotions. Lawrence Anthony hadn't seen or heard anything about Plai Thang for 38 years, not since the elephant had been moved to a different reserve. All these years, Lawrence Anthony had wondered what happened to the little calf who used to follow him everywhere. Now he couldn't stop himself from wanting to see if it was really Plai Thang. Lawrence Anthony knew the chances weren't good. Elephants live long lives, but they also learn to change and move forward. When he got to the sanctuary, a young ranger named Carol Buckley welcomed him. She was in her late 20s and told him she was the daughter of Solomon James, someone Lawrence Anthony used to work with. "My father always told me stories about you and Plai Thang," she said with a warm smile that lit up her face. "He said you two were never apart." As they walked around the sanctuary, Lawrence Anthony showed her the old photograph of Plai Thang and told her about the special times they'd shared. "He followed me around like a little dog," Lawrence Anthony said, his voice full of old memories. "We used to play hide-and-seek in the trees. But he always found me." Carol Buckley listened carefully, but her face showed worry. "Lawrence Anthony," she said gently, "you need to be ready for anything. It's been such a long time." Yes, elephants remember things well, but nearly 40 years is like a whole lifetime. Even with her warning, Lawrence Anthony couldn't let go of his hope. He remembered the special connection he'd had with Plai Thang, the playful look in the elephant's eyes, and how the elephant would react when Lawrence Anthony spoke to him. This connection seemed too strong to just disappear, didn't it? As they got closer to the main area, Carol Buckley explained that people had seen Plai Thang return to the reserve about a year ago. He was now one of the oldest elephants there, and while he seemed to recognize certain places and things, no one had seen him respond to a person the way Lawrence Anthony was hoping for. The odds were against him, but Lawrence Anthony's determination only grew stronger. "I just have to see him," Lawrence Anthony whispered quietly. "Even if he doesn't remember me, I need to know he's okay." As Lawrence Anthony walked the familiar paths of Thula Thula Reserve, memories came flooding back like a movie. He felt how much time had passed as he looked around the huge area. The sanctuary had grown so much bigger, and there were many more visitors than before. It wasn't the small, quiet sanctuary he remembered anymore. Now it was a busy place, full of tourists, schoolchildren, and researchers. Lawrence Anthony spent the morning walking the same routes he used to take, stopping by the ranger buildings where he used to feed the young elephants. He couldn't help smiling when he remembered Plai Thang's funny behavior, especially the time the baby elephant had sneaked into the kitchen and stolen a whole bunch of bananas. As he walked past the training areas, Lawrence Anthony saw some of the younger elephants playing, which reminded him of how playful Plai Thang used to be. In the afternoon, Carol Buckley took him to see Solomon James, who had come out of retirement just to visit when he heard Lawrence Anthony was back. Solomon James looked older, but his eyes still had the same bright curiosity. They hugged each other like old friends who had shared not just a job, but a deep love for animals. "It's so good to see you," Solomon James said warmly, patting him firmly on the back. Walking side by side, they toured the sanctuary and talked about all the changes that had happened over the years. As the two old friends shared memories, Lawrence Anthony felt a mix of emotions, excitement mixed with nervousness. He started wondering if Ply Thang would still have that same playful personality, but Solomon James's careful words made him less hopeful. "I won't lie to you, Lawrence Anthony," Solomon James said. "We've seen Ply Thang up close several times. He's different now. Wiser, yes, but also more careful around people. The years have changed him. The special bond you once had might feel like a distant memory to him now." But Lawrence Anthony refused to give up hope. He needed to believe that the elephant he had loved and cared for all those years ago was still there, somewhere inside. He held tightly to the old photograph he had brought with him, a reminder of the past. The next day, the reserve had a special event where visitors could watch the elephants in the open fields. Lawrence Anthony knew Ply Thang would be there, and he could feel his heart beating fast with excitement. The event brought more people than he had expected. Families, children, photographers, and even news reporters were there, and their talking filled the air. When the elephants came out, the crowd got more excited. Lawrence Anthony looked through the group of elephants, and then he saw him, the huge, magnificent elephant, walking steadily across the open field. His size and age made him stand out from the others. His tusks had grown long and beautifully curved. His skin was thicker and more wrinkled, but his movements still had a familiar grace that Lawrence Anthony recognized right away. Ply Thang stopped, and for just a moment it seemed like he was looking through the crowd and stopped when he saw Lawrence Anthony. The moment didn't last long, but it gave Lawrence Anthony a spark of hope. Could Ply Thang have remembered him? He called out to Carol Buckley, who was standing near the edge of the field, and told her what had happened. She suggested that Lawrence Anthony should get closer once the event was over. When the crowd started to leave, Lawrence Anthony carefully walked toward the field, staying far enough away so he wouldn't scare Ply Thang. He held up the photograph and called Ply Thang's name with a shaking voice. "Ply Thang, it's me," he said. "Do you remember me?" The elephant's ears moved, but there was no clear sign that he recognized Lawrence Anthony. The crowd had left, and the area was almost empty except for a few workers and the remaining elephants. Lawrence Anthony felt his hope start to fade. Was this as close as he would get to reconnecting with his old friend? Then something unexpected happened. Another elephant bumped Ply Thang's side, and this made him make a deep rumbling sound as his trunk lifted slightly toward Lawrence Anthony. It wasn't much, but it was enough to give Lawrence Anthony hope again. Carol Buckley, who had been watching from far away, noticed this small interaction and quickly signaled for Lawrence Anthony to take another step closer. Just as Lawrence Anthony took another careful step forward, Ply Thang's whole body language changed. His ears spread wide, and he moved quickly toward Lawrence Anthony. The air suddenly felt different. What had seemed like a quiet moment was now filled with tension. Lawrence Anthony froze, his mind racing with thoughts. Was Ply Thang angry with him? Had he made a mistake about the situation? Before he could react, Ply Thang's trunk wrapped around his waist and lifted him off the ground. The massive animal held Lawrence Anthony upside down, and the small group of people who had stayed behind gasped in shock. To everyone watching, it looked like the elephant was about to hurt him, and panic spread through the staff members who were ready to help. Hanging in the air, Lawrence Anthony could only look into Ply Thang's eyes, desperately searching for any sign of friendship or anger. His body filled with adrenaline, and his heart pounded in his chest, but he forced himself to stay calm, trying to understand what was happening. For several terrifying seconds, it felt like his fate was sealed. Then, just as suddenly as it had started, Ply Thang gently put him back on the ground, his movements surprisingly gentle. The tension broke, and Lawrence Anthony let out a breath he didn't realize he had been holding. The Rangers relaxed, and Carol Buckley ran to his side, her eyes wide with worry. "Are you okay?" she asked, breathing hard. "What just happened?" "I think he remembers me," Lawrence Anthony said, his voice full of wonder and relief. There was something in his eyes like he was trying to remember. Ply Thang stepped back, reaching his trunk toward Lawrence Anthony in a way that seemed hesitant, as if he was still trying to figure out who this man was, someone who had once been so important to him. Lawrence Anthony moved closer, reaching out his hand until his fingers touched the elephant's rough skin. He could see something in Ply Thang's eyes, curiosity, and maybe even recognition. Slowly, the elephant lowered his head, and Lawrence Anthony whispered, "Ply Thang, I never forgot about you." Tears filled Lawrence Anthony's eyes, not just because of seeing his old friend again, but because he realized that Ply Thang, even after almost 38 years, still seemed to recognize him deep down. Ply Thang's behavior changed. His hesitation turned into recognition, as if a long-buried memory had suddenly come back to life. His trunk reached toward Lawrence Anthony's face, moving carefully and curiously, touching the air as if getting to know an old friend again. For a moment, it felt like time had stopped. The remaining visitors, rangers, and staff watched in amazed silence, seeing the return of a friendship they thought was lost forever. The feeling in the air was so powerful that even the animals in nearby areas became quiet. Then Ply Thang made a deep, rumbling purr, a sound Lawrence Anthony remembered well from when the young elephant used to cuddle against him as a baby. The people around them realized they were seeing something extraordinary. Some had tears in their eyes, moved by this rare display of connection. "I've never seen him act like this with anyone," Carol Buckley whispered, clearly amazed. "It's like he really does remember you." Lawrence Anthony nodded, overwhelmed by joy. "He does remember," he said quietly. "My old friend is still there in Sade." Ply Thang gently nudged Lawrence Anthony's chest, then lifted his trunk high and made a triumphant trumpet sound. The sanctuary staff let Lawrence Anthony spend more time with Ply Thang, hoping their bond could grow even stronger. But while the reunion was beautiful, it also created a challenge. Ply Thang's behavior had become unpredictable because of the years he had spent in the wild. The staff suggested a gentle test to see if Ply Thang would respond to familiar activities that Lawrence Anthony used to do with him in the old days. Lawrence Anthony had an idea, a simple game he used to play with the young elephant years ago. Back then, he would hide behind a tree, and Ply Thang would enjoy finding him. Hoping to bring back deeper memories, Lawrence Anthony decided to play this game again in a wooded area of the reserve. As he walked toward the group of trees, Ply Thang followed at a careful distance. When they arrived, Lawrence Anthony hid behind a huge baobab tree, his heart racing with excitement. Looking out from his hiding spot, he watched as Ply Thang paused, seemingly trying to understand what was happening. After hesitating briefly, the elephant moved closer, swinging his trunk from side to side, searching for the familiar person from his past. Just like he had done decades ago, Ply Thang found Lawrence Anthony, but this time he stopped and hesitated before coming closer. It was a small victory, but it gave Lawrence Anthony hope that Ply Thang could remember more. However, playing the game again also showed the changes in Ply Thang's behavior. The elephant hesitated longer, and he often looked toward the open plains as if expecting to leave. Ply Thang's time spent with the wild herd had clearly affected his instincts, making him more alert to possible dangers. Lawrence Anthony realized that while their bond was coming back to life, there were still barriers built by the years of separation. Carol Buckley, watching from a distance, noticed Ply Thang becoming more restless. "Lawrence Anthony," she called out, her voice careful. "Maybe we should give him some space. He's been through a lot today." But Lawrence Anthony wasn't ready to end the day. "Just one more try," he said, determination in his voice. Lawrence Anthony took a deep breath and reached into his backpack, pulling out an old bell, a treasured reminder from their early training days. The sound of the bell had once been Plythang's signal that it was time to play. Lawrence Anthony rang it softly, and the clear, familiar sound echoed through the air. For a moment, Plythang stood perfectly still, his ears spreading wide as he listened carefully. The next few moments were crucial. If the sound brought back bad memories or overwhelmed him, it could ruin their progress. Lawrence Anthony waited, barely breathing, as he watched Plythang's reaction. This was the decisive moment that would determine everything. Plythang took a hesitant step forward, his eyes focused on the bell. Slowly, he approached Lawrence Anthony, reaching out with his trunk to touch the bell. Lawrence Anthony's heart filled with joy and relief. He gently petted Plythang's trunk and continued to ring the bell, trying to make the memory stronger. Then, something amazing happened. Plythang knelt down, lowering his massive head against Lawrence Anthony's chest, just like he used to do as a baby when he wanted comfort. It was a gesture of deep trust. The staff watching were struck silent with awe, and even Carol Buckley seemed visibly moved. Their peaceful reunion was suddenly interrupted when another male elephant, younger and more aggressive, wandered into the area with a loud trumpeting sound. Plythang immediately rose to his full height and positioned himself between Lawrence Anthony and the approaching bull, his ears flaring in warning. "Stay back!" Carol Buckley called out urgently. "Let Plythang handle this." The younger elephant eventually backed off, unwilling to challenge the elder's authority. Lawrence Anthony watched in amazement as Plythang returned to him, wrapping his trunk around his arm gently. In that moment, Lawrence Anthony felt like a young researcher again, and he suspected Plythang felt the same. "Thank you, old friend," Lawrence Anthony whispered softly. "You still remember how to take care of me." Did you enjoy this story? Would you have taken the risk to see your elephant friend after 38 years? Let us know in the comments below. If you liked the story, subscribe to this channel and leave a like. Love and friendship never truly disappear. Thanks so much for listening. See you in the next video. Have a great day.